Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday. But everything will be alright. Go raise your voice and say, hey, here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here with your love, 'cause the tree holds memories of everything we've been through. Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way, 'cause the tree holds memories, and the memories bring back you. 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 Memories bring back you.
Hope you all enjoyed looking at these photos while you were making your way in today. Just before we start the ceremony, Ciarán's great niece Rose would like to place some flowers on the coffin on behalf of the family. Well done, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this ceremony of remembrance and celebration for the life of Ciarán James Doris, who passed away suddenly on Saturday the 5th of December. He had just put his dinner in the slow cooker, he went for a walk until he got off the estate, and he was found by a neighbour at 4 p.m. My name is Neil Mellis. I'm part of the independent humanist ceremonies team here in the north east of Scotland, and I'm privileged to have been requested by the family to conduct this ceremony for him today. I spent some time on a video call with Ciarán's sister Aisling on Monday afternoon. I had a few telephone conversations and emails with his niece Amanda, and I've read numerous tributes to this wonderful, unique and much loved man. The tributes just kept coming in from family, friends, colleagues and neighbours alike. We'll hear many of them throughout the ceremony, but I'd just like to share some memories of Ciarán that were sent in by a couple of members of his family to me. His sister, Barbara, said, Ciarán was a wonderful brother-in-law and friend to me for over 40 years. He was a frequent visitor to our house and always looked forward to his visits. He would come laden with gifts and then insist on taking us out for dinner. He just couldn't do enough to help. He would do DIY jobs, cutting the grass, and nothing was too much trouble for him. We also had lovely holidays with him in Aberdeen, and again we could not do enough for us to make us so comfortable and make sure we had a great holiday. He had a great sense of humour and great company, and incredibly generous. And I can't believe he is gone, and it leaves a big hole in our lives and in our hearts. And that was from Barbara, his sister-in-law. And this one from his brother-in-law David, which his sister Aisling said epitomised Ciarán's wisdom and logic. David started by telling me that he was saying that he was a deeply believing Christian. But as he said, I would think that I can get along with most people, anyone, no matter their beliefs, though. I don't ever want to push that beliefs onto others, and I always hope that they would see that and be comfortable in my company. About 40 years ago, Ciarán was in our house when a guy came over who only wanted to belittle what I believed. I believe that God heals even today. Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. I don't know why, but even know less than most. This guy was trying to belittle what I believed, and he was quoting the Bible to prove his point. So I stupidly answered his healing in Acts in the Bible. to which he replied that that was only history and not relevant today. Ciarán was sitting, minding his own business, beside the fire reading a paper. Ciarán put down his newspaper and asked if he could say something. Ciarán said, "If I had got the manual for a car made in 1926, could it be called a history book?" And we both agreed. But if I got the car that went along with the manual from 1926, would it cease to become a history book and become a manual? End of argument as far as Ciarán was concerned. With that said, Ciarán picked up his newspaper and carried on reading with such wisdom and sensitivity. And David ended by saying, "Ciarán probably never agreed with what I believed, but he never made me feel less." And thank you to Barbara and David for these memories. So this will be a farewell ceremony exclusively dedicated to Ciarán. Today's sermon is an inclusive occasion, and although it's not a religious ceremony, we will have our own time for quiet reflection, thoughts, memories and personal prayers. Although our aim is to celebrate Ciarán's life, we've also got to acknowledge that this is undoubtedly a sad day. We're meeting in grief, and it's only right and natural that we should grieve, because that sorrow is a reflection of the measure of the love and respect that you all felt for Ciarán. His family lost a very important central figure in their lives. Much-loved son to the late Patrick and Kay, caring brother to Pauline, Brendan, Niamh, Colm, Aisling, Desmond, Fiona, and the late Eva and Jackie. He was a doting uncle to many nieces and nephews, and of course a great friend to many. However, at such a sad time, I think it's important to remember that Ciarán wasn't somebody who would wish you to dwell in a sorrowful mood. Well, nay, for too long anyway. He didn't like a fuss, and I think we're all sure that he'd be rolling his eyes back and probably swearing under his breath if he knew we were speaking about him just now. We meet in pain and sorrow that Ciarán is no longer with us, and although he's no longer a visible part of your lives, he will live on through your lifetime and in your memories. The exceptional part he played in your life will be remembered, understood and celebrated through his stories. And yes, there were many, many stories. The way to keep him in your hearts and in your minds and in your actions is to celebrate the life that he led. Ciarán was indeed well respected and well loved, so it is natural that you should mourn. But we should also remember his helpful, caring nature. He was sociable, friendly, outgoing. And one of his colleagues said, if you were his friend, Ciarán would do absolutely anything for you. He was very supportive to friends and colleagues, and so generous to his family. He certainly was a unique character with a wicked, dry sense of humour. And as Aisling said to me, he was just an amazing person. He could defuse a tense situation with a quick one-liner. And I would like to invite his niece Amanda to come up and say a few words about her uncle Ciarán on behalf of the nieces and nephews. Amanda.
Ciarán was a fantastic uncle to all of us. He was amazing at treating us like individuals from a young age. He was generous with his time, his patience and his kindness. He especially took his godparent role very seriously, including taking Patrick and Niall on holidays and encouraging them to not just eat beige food. Ciarán would tell dramatic stories from his time on the seas. I remember one story from when he was in a South American country dealing with delayed port paperwork that I did not understand, and the story ended in, "So we stole back our helicopters and went on our way." He also had stories of when he would be appointed to deal with strife on an oil rig. He described sitting each man down, listening to their side of things, and then pushing a piece of paper across the table with the number for child line on it. His epic sense of humour had an ability to diffuse situations as well as being challenging and straight-talking. Glenn Phillip mentioned Ciarán taking them to their favourite football stadiums and also showing them Hadrian's Wall to expand their cultural knowledge beyond football. Ciarán believed in hard work, adventure and showing kindness. Natalie remembers being 8 or 9 and Ciarán taking her to choose a Christmas tree for Granny's house. He took her to 10 different places with extreme patience and no doubt amusement until she chose the perfect one. He had an adventurous, cheeky streak, taking Ajay, my cousin around the many streets of Dublin looking for the perfect skip to make a home and assuring him that a tarp would solve the issue of having no roof. He was patient and kind, with a sense of humour that was golden, and always made himself available to someone who was struggling. He has given us so many happy memories. He expanded all our worlds with his infectious spirit. Rest in peace, Uncle Ciarán.
Well done, Amanda. Thank you very much indeed. The reason we are here today is to say goodbye, but also to focus on the many good memories you will have of Ciarán. And I will spend a little time looking back through his life and some of the things that made him special to each and every one of you. Ciarán James Doris was born in Dublin on the 3rd of December 1957, a son to the late Patrick and Kay Doris. He was brought up in the family home along with his brothers and sisters. One of his school friends sent us a message this week. Rudgar, he said he arrived in Dublin from Holland and ended up sitting next to Ciarán in the maths class. He became great friends, and Rudgar said that they were in the Scouts and they both enjoyed a great outdoors, so he had no problem calling into the Doris household at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, only to discover that Irish teenagers don't surface until lunchtime. The only other member of the family up at the early stage was his dad, so they had a long conversation and chats before Ciarán would eventually surface, probably about 10 a.m, which apparently was very early for him. When Ciarán left school, he joined the Scottish Merchant Navy and travelled the world. He had a great life in the sea, making many lifelong friends and visiting some amazing places in the world. There aren't many countries that Ciarán hasn't been to. Some of his favourite memories would have been visiting Japan to see Eva and to Hong Kong to visit Uncle Seamus. I received an email from Greg. Greg started work the same day as Ciarán, and they said that they shared a cabin for 4 months with 2 others. And he said Ciarán was the smallest ever cabin, but the other lads soon found out that he was the one who defended it from invasion from the other shipmates, which occurred quite regularly. We remained friends, sometimes not hearing or seeing him for a year or 2, and then he would just appear out of the blue. Even in his passing, he has brought these friends closer together. As in the last weeks, Greg said, I've spoken to people I haven't met, I haven't seen for the last 40 years. He will be missed by my friends and all those who had the luck and the good fortune to have met, schooled, scaled, and of course partied with him. May the winds in heaven always be at your back. Thank you, from Greg. Even when he was on shore, Ciarán would travel all over the place to meet up with family and friends, whether it was back to Ireland, where Colm remembers Ciarán giving him driving lessons in his old Morris Minor, visiting Mark in Toulouse, or turning up unannounced to visit his cousins in York. These cousins always knew that Ciarán had arrived because they came downstairs in the morning and they would see his legs poking out from under the dining room table where he'd been sleeping. And they knew it was going to be a great day because Ciarán had arrived. Pauline sent me a message about that old Morris Minor. She said that Ciarán just loved that car. He always had the bonnet and the boot lids open, and if Mother was looking for him, she knew where to find him, with his head stuck under that bonnet. He made the trip down to us at Brow when we were farmers, and he would come up from time to time to see when he came back waiting from the sea. On one occasion he arrived at the front door and asked for a dustpan and brush, Pauline said, muttering something if he needed to tidy something up in our lane. And it transpired that when he was coming down the lane he must have been a bit slippy, and somehow he managed to overturn the poor old Morris Minor, and it ended up crosswise and jammed in the lane. Thanks to Pauline for her memories as well. We're now going to continue with the eulogy with some video messages and tributes and recordings and music from some of his family and friends via our video recorder. Thank you.
Hello. The 7th of December was a very sad day for me as I learned that my longtime friend, colleague and rig manager had passed away on Saturday the 5th of December. His name was Ciarán Doris. I wish to pay tribute to Ciarán from myself and from other friends that had the privilege of knowing him both at sea and on shore in the marine life we all shared at some time. He was sometimes my mentor and other times my sounding board when I was having difficulties offshore. I could always rely on him to be supportive and pragmatic in his replies. We had all planned to meet in October at Aberdeen for the second Leeds Nautical College reunion for the class of 1979, but unfortunately COVID restrictions did not allow this, which made us all very sad, especially with Ciarán's passing. Ciarán was not a person you could ever pigeonhole. He was a unique character both at work and in his private life. When I stayed with him for a few days at his house in Bangkori, I found out he had no wife, dog, cat or TV. He was happy with his lot to live this way. To desire nothing beyond what you have is surely happiness. Ciarán was an avid reader and sometimes he would listen to the radio to catch the news. When he was my rig manager with Pride North Sea, he was working probably 18 to 20 hours a day and doing the job as manager, secretary and accountant by himself to keep the rig functioning. During that period, he was unselfish and gave several people chances to better themselves in their offshore career. He helped people to become a radio operator, welder and safety officer, for example, on the Pride Rotterdam, when they had no past experience in these positions. He also paid for or supplemented their academic costs. This is something that was unique in a rig manager's position, something that I had not seen before or since in 42 years at sea. He always met the incoming crews when he was in Esbjerg after their period on board was up and took them out for a thank you drink. His dark humour and astute sarcasm was one of his common ways to have a laugh with the boys, and sometimes a way to put over what he thought of their performance or lack of it. Ciarán did not take fools easily. He was eccentric and to me had a cracking sense of humour. Ciarán had a long-term illness and coped with it. He never mentioned about all the major physical problems he was suffering or the operations he had to go to eventually. He used to joke that the doctor said he had ailments of a 90-year-old, but he carried on. So it is left for me to say fair winds and following seas on Ciarán's journey upwards. He will be remembered by many of us for the right reasons. He was the master of his fate and the captain of his soul. Rest in peace, Ciarán.
Reading from Psalm 139. Lord, you know everything there is to know about me. You've examined my innermost being with your loving gaze. You perceive every movement of my heart and soul and understand my every thought before it even enters my mind. You are so intimately aware of me, Lord. You read my heart like an open book, and you know all the words I'm about to speak before I even start a sentence. You know every step I will take before my journey even begins. You've gone into my future to prepare the way, and in kindness you follow behind me to spare me from the harm of my past. With your hand of love upon my life, you impart a Father's blessing to me.
Farewell, Ciarán. Ciarán, like Eva and Jackie, was just 63 years with us. He was as extraordinary in his own way as they were. As a son, brother, uncle, friend, neighbour, he really had no equal. So many of his generous interventions in our lives will not be shared amongst us in a gathering of family and friends as they would be in normal times. On behalf of my siblings, I pay tribute to our brother, Ciarán James Doris. Ciarán was number 6 of 10 in the family of Catherine and Paddy Doris. I was away at school while Ciarán was growing up, but I enjoyed his and others coming down to Castletown, Mallow or Waterford with Mum and Dad on visiting days. We played basketball and explored the orchards and grounds. Ciarán went to Kilmacud Primary School and then St. Benilda's College on Upper Kilmacud Road. Growing up in a family of 10 children, things were simpler in those days. We spent the time after school and on weekends in our large back garden or in the cul-de-sac in front. We had, of course, a deer park, or woods as we called it, at the top of the road as we got older. Several of our back gardens were linked like a maze with holes in the hedges, and it was a paradise in good weather, where kids only needed their imagination and overgrown bushes for fun. Some of the best times were trips to British Bay or Silver Strand beaches. All 8, 9 or 10 of us, as the family grew, would manage to pile into the Ford Anglia station wagon, some crammed into the boot, others sitting astride older siblings on the back seat, on a cushion across the handbrake, or with the smallest on mother's knee. Dad spent most of the week travelling for work, and the last thing he wanted to do was to drive to Wicklow beaches on a Sunday. But we managed to persuade him by pulling his ears and the hairs on his legs until he moved himself. I was volunteered, likely as not, to be buried up to my neck in the sand dunes by Ciarán and the others. We had sandwiches, lemonade, both with a sprinkling of sand and sunburn. Ciarán taught Colm to drive in his beloved Morris Minor and took Fiona and our pals to see the first Star Wars movie. Ciarán would tell you that he struggled with the exam side of academic life, but not the pursuit of knowledge. From an early age, he became adept at many practical tasks: camping, outdoor cooking, painting, home repairs. He could be a little tetchy with Dad's perfectionist approach, but some of it rubbed off on him as well. He conspired with Mum to send Dad on errands so that he could get on with the latest painting, gardening, or other home project. Growing up, Ciarán had fewer hair-raising adventures than his brothers and sisters. But on one occasion, the Garda, or police, were not impressed with the 12-year-olds driving John's mother's car around Dublin City. Luckily for them, John's father, Uncle Jack, rescued them with a donation to the Understanding Constabulary of a thoughtful bottle of whiskey. Thankfully, our parents never found out. At 17 years of age, Ciarán opted to join the Merchant Navy and was successful in obtaining a place in Leith in Scotland. There were various periods of college training and sea assignments. He achieved the rank of second officer in the Merchant Navy. His adventurous tales were fantastic to listen to. Slamming on the brakes on a bulk carrier meant it took 20 or 30 nautical miles to stop. Our home was decorated with paintings on felt from Indonesia and other knickknacks that he brought back from his trips around the world. Later, Ciarán was increasingly prevented from any type of work that required him to pass stringent safety survival tests. He had developed arteriosclerosis at a comparatively early age. Despite his debilitating condition, he managed to pass safety survival checks into his early 50s. Ciarán could not abide any sort of unfairness. During one port call to Boston, USA, he was returning to his ship after a night out and saw 2 men beating up a coloured man. Ciarán intervened. The attackers were police officers. After a court hearing, his papers were stamped forbidding further entry to the US. This was to prevent his visiting our sister Eva in California during her final illness, and though he could not attend her funeral, he still helped other members of the family to make it over. Ciarán retired to Scotland outside Aberdeen and became well-known and well-loved neighbour. He lovingly restored his cottage and adapted it to suit his health conditions as they deteriorated. Ciarán loved company and would take it on himself to visit his brother's family in Waterford, his friends in Cork, our mother's extended family in York, or Niamh in London. Always he arrived with gifts, and before long had a work schedule of repairs with which he busied himself. Wherever he ended up, he would go on long walks, taking along a nephew or niece, not necessarily his own. Although he was a tease, children of all ages loved his company and appreciated the learning experiences he created out of every outing. His generosity, first in terms of time, knew no limit. He was always arriving home from wherever he had been, or from Scotland in the later years, and immediately set about house maintenance tasks, ferrying mother and others here and there. He was very thoughtful and generous with others of my siblings in supporting his father and mother. He would sit in family gatherings, as was his way, quietly, saying very little, but would pick up a need that was not being met at the time. When he was leaving, or later, some financial or other support would find its way to where it was needed. He never asked or accepted repayment. Aisling recalls that Ciarán would visit all our neighbours during the big snow-ins and shovel their drives or take their shopping lists on the occasions he was visiting over Christmas or New Year. We all found that he would demur at a gift if it was new, but give him a second-hand iron or iPad, and he would lovingly restore it and treasure it. More than likely, if you made him a present of something new, he would pass it on to someone else who had a need. Others will have more knowledge of his life in Scotland amongst his neighbours and friends, but I do know he spent quite a deal of time with a close friend in North Shields who was under palliative care, even while he himself was being treated with vascular surgery. Ciarán had a dry wit. His nurse was Nurse Ratchet and his doctor was the vet. He didn't bother with TV, but he acquired Dad's love of BBC4. He immersed himself in his renovations, car maintenance, helping out neighbours with their livestock, reading and listening to music. He could not get to sleep before reading a good book. Ciarán was a very private individual, and it took some patience to find out how things were going for him, especially in regard to his health. You will be sorely missed by your brothers and sisters, your friends and neighbours. We wish you fair winds and following seas, Brother Ciarán.
Many thanks to everyone who contributed to this wonderful heartfelt tributes, as well as the music by Patrick as well. When Ciarán left the Merchant Navy, he travelled around the world for a few years. He lived in South Shield in the northeast of England before moving here in Aberdeenshire when he started to work in the oil industry around 30 years ago. He became a very well-respected and hard-working rig manager, and many of his colleagues sent tributes about Ciarán, as we heard earlier. As well as his successful offshore career, Ciarán became great friends with many of his neighbours here in the northeast of Scotland, and he quite often joined them for a cup of tea or a nice glass of wine. His neighbour George told me that Ciarán had a way of linking the community together, and they had some great stories about barbecues with Catherine and Mario, Ken's birthday party earlier this year, Ciarán getting stuck up a roof, playing bowls in his garden, and sharing tools and helping each other with their DIY projects. He would sometimes arrive with Ali and Mac for a day and maybe spend 4 days with them. And they all agreed that they are grateful for the memories that they will miss. They will miss the Irish humour and the mad, cantankerous Irishman. Ciarán had a great outlook in life and made the most of what he had, finding love, friendship and contentment. And I'm privileged to have shared with you a few of these memories and reflections of his life. And I know that you'll have many, many more of your own. And I would now like to invite Tim to read a poem which was written especially for Ciarán by his sister Niamh. And this is called Tribute to My Brother.
Tribute to My Brother by Anthony. The 8 bells have been rung, for your work is done, and to let you know it's time to go. Your body worn and racked with pain, your heart can't beat with all that strain. A supporter of brothers so gentle and kind, you looked out for those who lagged behind. Never one for collecting stuff, you always claimed you had enough. Our careful choice of that special jumper you gifted to that bloody uncle. Like most of all your siblings, you devoured all its books and scribblings, for knowledge galore was your gain. There wasn't a topic, large or microscopic, that didn't have space in your brain. Death took you too quick, the reaper was so very slick. He denied you chance to say our goodbyes. But spared you the pain of hearing our cries. He saved you from your biggest dread, a lengthy, painful stay in bed. Looked after us, clan. It was never part of your crib.
Thanks very much to Tim. These words were written by his sister Niamh. And now, ladies and gents, so let's let your own thoughts drift to your own personal memories of Ciarán while listening to a song chosen by the family. It's called Fiddler's Green by Liam Clancy.
As I walked down the dockside one evening so fair, to view the still water and to take the salt air, I heard an old fisherman singing a song. He said, "Take me away, lads, my time is not long. Wrap me up in me oilskins and jumper, no more on the docks I'll be seen. Just tell me, old shipmates, I'm taking a trip, mates, and I'll see you one day in Fiddler's Green." Now Fiddler's Green is a place I've heard tell, where fishermen go if they don't go to hell, where the weather is fair and the dolphins do play, and the cold coasts of Greenland are far, far away. Wrap me up in me oilskins and jumper, no more on the docks I'll be seen. Just tell me, old shipmates, I'm taking a trip, mates, and I'll see you one day in Fiddler's Green. Oh, the weather is fair and there's never a gale, and the fish jump aboard with one swish of their tail. You can lie in your hammock, there's no work to do, and the skipper's below making tea for the crew. Wrap me up in me oilskins and jumper, no more on the docks I'll be seen. Just tell me, old shipmates, I'm taking a trip, mates, and I'll see you one day in Fiddler's Green. Oh, I don't need a harp, nor a halo, not me. Just give me a breeze and a good rolling sea, and I'll play this all squeeze box as we sail along, with the wind in the rigging to sing me a song. Wrap me up in me oilskins and jumper, no more on the docks I'll be seen. Just tell me, old shipmates, I'm taking a trip, mates, and I'll see you one day in Fiddler's Green.
Ciarán loved life and loved, enjoyed that, the company, especially that of his family and friends. And being the kind of man he was, I'm sure that Ciarán would not want the pain felt by those of you who mourn his passing to overshadow the memories of the happy times you shared with him. And I do hope that as we begin to close this tribute for Ciarán, you've been able to focus on something about him that has made you smile, that you've been able to remember him not only with a heavy heart, but also with a sense of calm when you reflect that he is at peace. Before we conclude the ceremony, Ciarán's family have asked me to express a heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for your attendance here today, in person as well as online. Thank you to Ali and Mac, who have helped Amanda coordinate things locally. And thanks also from the family for all the messages, cards, support and the condolences which have been such a comfort to them. The family would also like to thank everyone who sent in tributes, which has given them so much joy and things to laugh about during this sad time. And the family would also like to thank Sam and his colleagues at Brian Smith Funeral Directors for his help and their guidance over the last week or so. Everyone here present at Baldarach is warmly welcomed and encouraged to join the family at the Douglas Arms here in Banchory for tea, coffee and refreshments, and of course to share some of your own memories of Ciarán. And now can I please ask you to be upstanding. As it is now time for us to say a formal farewell to Ciarán. But in bidding him farewell, you know you will never forget him and what he meant to you all. Every living being has a beginning and an end. For each of us, there is a time to be born and a time to say goodbye. And so this time has come for Ciarán. And now, as we bid him farewell, we commit his character and his personality to our memories. And lastly, we commit his body to its natural end, returning it to the earth that sustained him and rejoining the great cycle of nature. Ciarán will have a place in your hearts for all time, through the warmth of summer, the cold of winter, through the freshness of spring and the mists of autumn, knowing that he had a good, rewarding life, and he is now at peace. You may be seated. Ciarán leaves behind a rich, personal legacy of love, caring, respect and humour that will surely live on through his family and generations still to come. And in this way, his influence in the world will still continue. The journey through life can be long or short, but what really matters is how we live, that we make the most of what we have, live life to the full, valuing the possibilities of each and every day. And Ciarán, James, Doris, you certainly have left us with a fine example of that. And thank you, ladies and gents, for being here in person and online to share this moment with his family.